Views expressed by Casters Guild members are only the opinions of that member, and that could change from day to day. Guild members may use mature language, but that in no way means they are mature. Listener discretion is advised.
Whether you pulled your sword from the stone or it was gifted from a lady in the lake, you're still going to have to choose some knights to fill this round table. Just make sure you don't pick someone who will stab you in the back and sleep with your wife. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and that's the spell we're casting tonight on Casters Guild. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Casters Guild. I'm your Guildmaster, Rick Perry, and my nightly table is a rhombus.
And I'm your Guildmaster, Baron Kane, and I'm an ugly, horrible, grouchy old man.
And joining us tonight is a returning guild member. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mary. I'm the lady in the lake handing out random swords as a form of government.
I didn't vote for him.
Yeah, that's not a viable system.
So tonight we are talking Arthurian legend. We brought an expert because my knowledge is lacking. So we're going to start a little different than we normally do. Mary, if there was one thing that you want us to come away from this discussion with, if there's one thing about Arthurian legend that is burning that you need to talk about, what would that one thing be?
All legends have root in history.
That's true. I'll take that. From what I understand, there's a lot of debate about whether or not King Arthur was a real person, whether he was an exaggerated person who came up after Rome fell and basically a bunch of land had to be claimed. Was he the exaggerated version of someone who helped claim all that land, or was he just 100% fictional and put in a real place? I don't know if it's been decided whether or not one is true or not, but I know there's debate.
There is, and his name is Ambrosius Aurelianus. He was a Saxon Roman that helped free Britannia from Roman rule during possibly the Battle of Mons Badonicus or Baden Hill. Dates really aren't given as to when that was. Nennius, or Bede, one of the two, puts it at 1493. Gildas puts it probably in the middle of the 6th century. He's the closest to that time period, but no information is really given other than that there was a battle. So there's a possibility that Arthur existed as a war leader, but not really as the king we know him as.
Yeah, but the king's more fun, right? I mean, let's take some pagan elements and some Christian elements and mix them all up into a nice little legend, and that makes the whole thing more fun.
Well, and it also depends on the king you're looking at. Because if you're looking at Sir Thomas Malory's From La Morte to Arthur, he's definitely a more warlike king, with a lot of Christian elements thrown in. But if you look at Chrétien de Troyes, he's the very French romance. He focuses a lot on the chivalry and courtesy, like the story of Percival and the Holy Grail, and Lancelot and Guinevere.
Lancelot
and makes Arthur
his fan fiction OC that he added into the canon all by himself.
Yeah, Lancelot does show up quite a bit later than the original Arthurian stories from Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century.
Yeah, I mean, like, basically, you have the knight who, I mean, it changes later with Galahad, right? But, like, Lancelot, it was like the knight who's better than all the other knights. He's the perfect character. Even Guinevere loves Lancelot more than she loves Arthur. And, you know, of course that's somebody's original character. Please don't steal. And then he's presented with a very French or even Arabic idea of that love conquers all. That, like, love is more important than, let's say, marriage. In those books or writings or however you want to say it, Lancelot's the good guy, right? Even though he's in this adulterous relationship, he's the adulterer. Like, he's the good guy because he's going after true love versus just like a marriage of convenience.
Right. It's the idea of courtly love that took root in France And it's more the idea that you can have true love without having a marriage partner, spouse. It's just you would set this person on a pedestal, basically. It's why if you go to like the Maryland Renaissance Fair, they have the beautiful maiden that they give a rose to, that they give something to at the end of a tournament. It's the idea of courtly love and courtesy. He's not really... Lancelot is neither good nor bad in many ways. And Galahad is actually his son.
I did not know that. I know that like later on Galahad introduces the character as like Lancelot but better.
Yes, he is Lancelot but better, basically. So, and there's one of the downfalls with Lancelot is that he does what he does with Guinevere, and stories differ because sometimes he kidnaps her because sometimes she wants to go with him. Sometimes it's just courtly love. Sometimes it actually is an affair. Nothing is ever really clear, depending on who you listen to.
Yeah, it's you have stories where Arthur's the good guy, in which case Lancelot's definitely the bad guy, right? And then you have stories where Lancelot's the good guy, in which case Arthur is definitely the bad guy. They don't really walk too many. They don't walk down the middle a whole lot. It's a lot of, Lancelot either saving Guinevere from Arthur or Lancelot stealing Guinevere from Arthur.
Mm-hmm. There is one time that Lancelot saves Guinevere from being kidnapped by Maleagin, who is trying to kidnap her from Camelot in order to lure out Arthur. Most of the time, they're very black or white characters. They're either very good or very bad, but there are sometimes, like Gawain in the Green Knight, where they're kind of in between.
So what's your favorite telling? Where do you land as far as is Lancelot a good guy?
For the most part, he is. He makes mistakes, and it makes him one of the more human knights. Where Arthur, in some ways, he's put on a pedestal, and he's not as human as Lancelot. He's very robotic. He goes to war. He's the king. He doesn't make mistakes. Where his knights are very, very human and make interesting mistakes and weird choices.
I'm my name's Percival, and I'm going to go to this dinner and say nothing. And because I say nothing, I'm going to curse this Fisher King, and then I'm going to wait for Galahad to fix it.
Right, but here's the crazy thing with him doing what he did to the Fisher King. It heals the Fisher King, and he gets the Grail.
Right.
So he says the right thing, but goes about it in the wrong way.
A very Game of Thrones of them.
Yeah, for a while, it's very Game of Thrones after Arthur becomes king, where all the dukes are just fighting amongst themselves. They're fighting him because they don't believe that he is the rightful king of England, because Igraine and Uther never said that he was theirs. And it isn't until years after he becomes king that Igraine steps forward and says, yeah, he's mine, and he's Uther's. So, yeah, he's king.
Yeah, which was introduced later, right? I mean, there was a while in the myth where it wasn't even questioned whether or not Arthur was Uther's son. And then later on in the myths, like, he had to jump through the hoops of, like, pulling the sword from the stone and all that in order to prove that he was Uther's son.
Right, that didn't show up until probably the 13th and 14th centuries, and was solidified with Sir Thomas Malory.
And that's around the era where it has, like, Merlin being, like, his mentor, either through childhood or early adulthood, depending on the story.
He actually does not really meet Merlin until he becomes king.
Okay.
Merlin takes him as a newborn to Sir Ector, but then doesn't see him again until after Arthur has pulled Caliburn from the stone. So Merlin likes to interfere like Dumbledore, only when it is convenient for him.
Well, I mean, the man's dang near omniscient, right? I mean, like, because he was almost basically the Antichrist until his mother was like, nah, screw that, we're gonna go ahead and baptize him. And then his demon side gives him the power to see the past and present completely clearly, and then God grants him the power to see the future, the power of prophecy. I mean, when you see and know all, I mean, you only interfere when it makes sense to, I guess.
He can also change shape. There's twice in the first couple chapters of Le Morte d'Arthur, he changes into a boy to speak with Arthur, and then he changes into a very old man in order to give counsel, because Arthur wouldn't take it from the 13-year-old, but would take it from the 70-something-year-old that was bent and gnarled. So he's got that too.
Which is also where some of the myths saying that he aged backwards comes from. I mean, some of the myths say he aged backwards, other ones, he just shapeshifted.
Mm-hmm. No one really knows how old Merlin is. He just kind of shows up randomly at some point in the Arthurian legends and stays. He's as early as Vortigern in the legends, and that's centuries before Arthur, technically.
And that's all before he starts simping over a girl, teaches her all of his magic, and then she's just like, nah, I don't want to hang out with you anymore.
Yes, Nimue, one of the ladies of the lake, that enchants him in some stories with a magic ring, and then locks him in a cave to die, or leaves him there to stay for eternity. Depends on who you read.
Because who knows if he can actually die?
Who knows? The only evidence we have that he was actually born was that we know his mother was human and his father was an incubus, and that's all the information we have.
So who's your favorite knight?
Gawain. Gawain is my favorite.
Why is that?
He's so ready to just get into the middle of everything. And him doing that, him being so brash, it causes a lot of problems for him, but it also humbles him in a way that makes him a much better person. Like in Gawain and the Green Knight, this knight has come into the court of King Arthur, and he looks like a tree. He's dressed in green, his horse is green, and he gives this challenge to the court to give one blow, and that in 1 year and a day he would return it. Well, Arthur steps to take it because he wanted the axe that the Green Knight carries. Well, Gawain, who's his nephew, was like, no, let me do it. So he steps up and takes the axe and chops the knight's head off. It rolls around the court, and the knight picks it up, scares Guinevere half to death, and then charges Gawain to find him in 1 year at the Green Chapel. Well, about 11 and a half months later, Gawain's like, oh, yeah, I should probably go find this guy, because he doesn't know where the Green Chapel is. So he travels across the country. He can't find anything that even looks remotely like a Green Chapel. And he ends up meeting Sir Bertilac and his wife, and they take him in. It's right about Christmas time. And he meets the wife and this weird-looking old lady that's treated with high honor, almost more than the lady. Well, the next day, Sir Bertilac says, I'm going to go out hunting, and whatever I bring back, I'll trade you for whatever you have won that day. He goes out and he catches a stag, and when he returns, Gawain gives him what he had won, which was a single kiss, from his wife. She had snuck into Gawain's room in an attempt to seduce him, and he turns her away. But he, being a knight, does what is courtesy and gives her a kiss. Well, this goes on for 3 days. At each time, the number of kisses increases, and each time the Lord, Sir Bertilac, brings back something different to give to Gawain. Well, on the 4th day, when he turns her away again, she gives him a belt to wear, and he has to hide it, and he lies to Sir Bertilac. Well, the next day he goes to the Green Knight, and the Green Knight goes to strike him, and the first time he flinches. So the knight goes to hit him again, and he shows the girdle. And when he does, the Green Knight realizes that he had lied, because the Green Knight is Sir Bertilac. And he strikes him a third time and leaves a mark across his neck, but tells him he did what was right in the long run. And he goes back to the court, and from the knights tease him, and to him it's humiliating because he lied and he got caught. But they all decide to wear green sash as a reminder of telling the truth is a whole lot better than lying, because this is what you get for it. Gawain carried that mark for the rest of his life. Ever since I read Gawain in the Green Knight, he's been one of my favorites because he doesn't stop. Even though he ends up being humbled by this, he ends up becoming one of Arthur's greatest knights.
Now, I haven't seen, so this could be a dumb question, because I haven't seen the new movie, The Green Knight. Does that have anything to do with Arthurian legend?
Yes. Gawain was he was a knight of the Round Table. He's Arthur's nephew through Morgana Le Fay, Arthur's sister. But I'm pretty sure that the movie is based on the actual legend of Gawain and the Green Knight. I haven't seen it either, so.
Baron, you have, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you basically a similar story?
No, it's I'm going to say it's spot on enough.
Okay.
I mean, obviously you're going from a written story to a visual story. So they're going to take some liberties, they're going to take some, some creative license. But yeah, I mean, especially I think that they handled, especially because I was holding out for the end, is what I was doing. Everything in between the beginning and the end, that I think they hit the middle, they hit the beginning perfectly, and then I think they hit the end perfectly. Everything in the middle, it was like I kind of got lost on a few things, and I think they threw in a couple of other things that weren't directly related to it. I don't know, I'd have to watch it again, but it was perfect. It was spot on. They caught the feeling of it really well. And they never come right out and say that he's the Green Knight, but you can look at him and be like, God, son of a bitch.
Well, you find out later that he tells Gawain that the old crone that's with the lady that's her handservant is actually Morgana Le Fay, and that she had enchanted Sir Bertilac to look that way so that he would scare Guinevere to death.
Huh.
Oh, Morgana is not a very nice person.
Well, in
I can kind of understand
tellings,
why.
She was like completely benevolent, right? She's even the one who healed Arthur. Of course, you start to add in Christian elements, and the Fae, the 9 sisters of the Fae, are of course going to be twisted to be a little bit less benevolent.
Yeah, we can't have anything pagan in our Christian stories.
She's never been a particularly nice person, but she was at least she was good for the most part until Arthur slept with her while she was married to King Lot. And that's how you get Mordred. There's a lot of contention over whether it was consensual or whether Arthur raped her. And that's why she hates him.
Yeah, there's that consensual, there's that rape on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Because, then you have that story that she manipulated the whole thing to be able to gain that seed, to be able to have Mordred to take over the country.
And she would have seen Uther becoming king over her father, the Duke of Cornwall, as a slight to her family, honestly. And what Merlin and Uther did to even get Igraine pregnant. Like, the real Duke had been dead for 3 hours when Merlin disguised Uther as the Duke of Cornwall. So it's at Tintagel, which is a real place. I believe it's in Wales.
Maybe. I think so. I had a friend go there. Is that where the Cave of Merlin is?
That is a good question. I don't know. So I would love to visit Tintagel, and I think there's another fort there that they believe might have been, it sounds like terrible, but I know that's not correct, that had been where the Duke of Cornwall was killed.
Don't ask me to pronounce anything even vaguely Welsh. It's not gonna happen.
Well, and there's a lot of contention over whether Arthur is Welsh, English, Britannic, Irish, Scottish, or even French.
Well, we
from
know
the Brittany region.
We know his sword is Welsh. I mean, Caliburn, which later became Excalibur, and even Caliburn came from the Welsh version, or like the name is bastardized. So like sometimes it's a different sword, other times Caliburn becomes Excalibur. Sometimes it's always been Excalibur. But like the name is definitely someone took the name Caliburn, added the French accents to it, and you get Excalibur. And even Caliburn wasn't the original name. It was a Welsh name that, once again, don't ask me to pronounce it. I could write it down for you. And even then, it's not necessarily the name of a sword. Like it's literally like, it literally translates to just like strong blade or even like hard blade. So like it could just be like, it might even have been just the Welsh name for sword.
That's the way I always heard it. It was just the name for Caliburn was just the word for sword.
Yeah,
at the time. Which you look at all the different cultures around the world, and it's like, oh, what's that? Oh, that's a claymore. What's that? It just means sword. Or what's katana? Just a sword.
And there's some scholars that believe that Caliburn comes from the ancient names of Ireland and Scotland, Caledonia and Hibernia, with the X being on to Excalibur as an idea of it being outside of those regions, so taking in Britannia and Wales.
It's a Brexit prophecy.
How are the Brexit supporters not using Excalibur as like their symbol?
Brexcalibur? No, that's too much.
Well, and Caliburn is the sword that's pulled from the stone that makes Arthur king. In certain stories, it's destroyed when he's fighting Pellinor, who in some cases is the Black Knight. And if you've ever seen anything Monty Python, you know exactly who the Black Knight is.
'Tis just a flesh wound.
What are you going to do, hit me with your head? It's one of my favorite movies, so...
I mean, you're a nerd. I mean, like it's a requirement almost. I mean, I'm not one to say there's any requirement to being a nerd, but if there were, viewing and enjoying Monty Python and Holy Grail would definitely be on that list.
So, funny thing, I took British literature in high school, and eventually we got to Arthurian Myth, something that, you know, was even back then was near and dear to my heart, and I was making because he was like, oh, he didn't tell us what it was. He's like, we're going to watch a movie for Arthurian stuff. And I'm like making recommendations. I was like, hey, we should watch this. Let's watch Excalibur. Let's forget about that nude scene. Let's just watch Excalibur. And then the day happened, and it was Monty Python and Quest for Holy Grail, which, by the way, I will give him mad credit for going through that movie and pointing out all of the intricacies of Arthurian myth that they wove into that movie, and all the... Essentially, he gave us like a friggin' Easter egg breakdown of everything that was in there, including like the 1, 2, 5
Yes!
Thing. It was like, you know what? I didn't even think about it that much, but hey, thanks for pointing it out. Crazy.
Oh, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Monty Python, but that is one of the movies I will watch over and over again. The Excalibur is the one he gets from the Lady of the Lake, that he gets in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Right.
That's one of my favorite scenes, when he's walking through the village and they're like, you can't be our king, we didn't vote for you.
It was so well done. So well done.
I had an English teacher in high school that would take the tray around, the wheelie tray, whatever it is, the cart, to get books, and he would go, bring out your books, dong.
Funny.
He was a little weird.
It's definitely one of the most quotable movies of all time.
I was about to say, it kind of makes you wonder how many people just quote that movie and don't even realize they're quoting it.
True.
I will say I knew I was quoting the movie, but I was quoting the movie before I ever saw it. Like, I used to quote the movie knowing I was quoting the movie because my friends had seen it in, like, middle school, and then I didn't see it until I got to high school, and then I was like, oh, that's what that's from. That's the exact scene. That's awesome.
A couple of my friends were in Hunchback of Notre Dame, and they were all dressed as monks, and they all had books and were reenacting that scene, walking across the stage. It's recorded somewhere. I have to find it and send it to you if I can.
Fantastic. I mean, at this point, it's kind of funny because the majority of even the accepted quote-unquote canon of Arthurian legend is written by so many different authors who, I mean, had nothing to do with the original telling or the original writing, and it's like the entire legend is made up of fan fiction. And then now that it's public domain, it's just continues to be written upon, and what most people know of Arthurian legend is what was written after it became public domain, and that kind of became, people were just like, yeah, now this public domain, I'm going to write whatever I want about it, and that's what people know about it now.
Well, and these legends and stories are 1,500 years old. Gildas was the first one to mention Arthur in history, and that was sometime in the 6th century. So they've been around for a long time. And there's interesting historical connections that show that Arthur could be real. He's mentioned, of course, at the Battle of Baden Hill. There's a record somewhere that says he might have become king of Scotland in 574. There's a hill fort called Dunneth in Scotland, where there is a stone that you stand in, and that's where the saying taking the sword from the stone comes from, because he would have been standing in it and would have taken a sword to the stone and would have stepped in it and stepped out, showing that he was king, because it would essentially leave his footprint, as they believed, in the stone. And that was probably about 574. But the stories from Thomas Mallory and Chrétien de Troyes, they take place in a period that doesn't really exist, because they're writing for the modern audience legends that take place almost 1,000 years earlier. There is a Lucius, of an emperor of Rome, that they meet when he decides that Rome wants Britannia back. The last Roman emperor named Lucius died in 169 AD. Oh, there's a possibility that could be the one they mean. But the neatest thing is, in 1191, monks found this massive grave at Glastonbury Tor. And inside was a huge iron cross that had, supposedly, the name Arthur and Guinevere on it. And when they dug a little deeper, they found a huge skeleton of a man next to the smaller skeleton of a woman. Unfortunately, they disappeared sometime between then and when King Henry VIII separated from the Catholic Church in the 16th century. So we'll never know if they were real or if the monks just made up this story. But some scholars believe Glastonbury Tor could be Avalon, because the area around Glastonbury Tor, that hill that sits right by the abbey, was actually marshland for a long time, and they drained it to make fields that they could use for the abbey. But it would flood on a regular basis and get very, very foggy, making it look like an island. And there's deep connections to Joseph of Arimathea. That's supposedly where they ended up to make the first church in England after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And there's a tree that grows in Glastonbury Tor, and there's no other one like it except in the Middle East. It's the place that they originate from, and it blooms every few years or so, but it's not native to England. So there's all kinds of legends that connect very deeply to Christian tradition in Arthurian legend.
Yeah, and I mean, who knows if it was a bunch of different people, and like those people, their stories get exaggerated and then put together and then all credited to Arthur or one of his knights, or if it's, fiction 100%. So, or if, maybe it was one guy, who knows? I mean, with the way record keeping was at the time, it's difficult to tell.
Well, there's a reason it's called the Dark Ages. It's not because there wasn't learning and education. It's literally because everything that was from that time period is gone. It didn't survive because it's paper. It burns and it disintegrates and gets damaged, and those books just never made it past that point. If we could have those records, we might actually be able to find the real Arthur. But for now, he's just relegated to a possibility. And there's nothing wrong with that. It gives a little bit of hope to people that might not have anything else, that these stories could be true. That there is someone out there, the once and future king, who could return to save humanity from whatever happens.
Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be great?
Well, I mean, if you've ever seen the movie The Sword and the Stone, that's based on the book The Once and Future King by T.H. White. The same with the musical Camelot. That's what he's based it on. And Famelot, the spoof of Camelot, which is also Monty Python. I've seen that one on stage. That, if you ever get the chance to see it on stage, it is hilarious. It's one of the best shows I've seen.
So, what would you say one of those is like your favorite modern telling of Arthurian legend? Because a lot of, so like, I want to say, first of all, that most modern tellings, or anytime you see Arthurian legend characters show up, it's because they're telling a character-driven story, and people know these characters. So, like, if you want to tell a character-driven story, these are the perfect characters to do it, and anybody can use them. And a lot of modern retellings are like, what if, this is Arthurian legend, but what if Arthur did this, or what if Merlin did that, or what if they were younger, or what if they were in modern day?
Allow me to add to that. I think that is every telling of Arthurian legend. It is, we somewhere had a story, and then someone wrote it down, and they're like, what if? Mm-hmm. And then someone read that, and they're like, oh, but what if? And, I mean, like, literally, and then you gotta throw in the agendas of the people who wrote them, and what agenda they were trying to push at the time, and that's even included in modern day tellings, because, then you have people who are writing these movies and writing these stories, and they're like, well, I believe that, this was actually how it really was. Like, the movie King Arthur with Clive Owen, is that his name? So, yeah, they're like, oh, well, I believe that Arthur was actually a Roman general who battled the Picts and all this stuff, and this is the story that I'm going to tell. And, again, it's just, you have a lot of agendas, even political agendas. I mean, even in, like, ancient Greek myth, you have these stories that are told by people, like stories that originated in Mycenaean Greece that moved down into like more modern, and you have Persephone, who is this super powerful underworld goddess in Mycenaean Greece, and then thousands of years later comes to Greece, and all of a sudden she's being kidnapped by Hades and being forced to live in the underworld. And it's like, okay, someone definitely had some kind of consensual non-consent fantasy going on right there. So let's just, so yeah, definitely. I think that Arthurian, like especially these modern tellings, it's just, you're right. It's what if, and it's always been that way.
Well, Geoffrey of Monmouth, who wrote this all-inclusive history of Britannica that included the story of Arthur and Merlin, and had these prophecies of Merlin, and he just wrote and wrote and wrote about these men, and none of it could be proven. But one of the reasons he did it was because the power of the Norman French that had conquered in 1066 was fading in 1150 when he was writing. So he wrote it most likely in French, even though he was a Welsh scholar, and it was designed to unite all of England under this banner, giving the idea that Arthur was from Brittany, which is in France. And then Britons left, the Brittany left England when the Saxons invaded, and they couldn't stop the invasion. So a group left and went to Francia, modern-day France, and settled in what is now the Brittany region. That's why it's called Brittany or Brittany. Same with the Normans. The Normans settled in Normandy. They were Northmen or Vikings. And it's the idea that Arthur was a Brittani. He is with these Northmen, these Norsemen, or the Vikings. The Duke of Normandy has taken over. He's the line of kings because he's related to Edward, who was the great-great-grandson of Alfred the Great, who supposedly is the direct line of Arthur. So it was a political move to try to unite the Anglo-Saxons and the Norman French. Didn't work out real well, but he tried. So they didn't like each other. It was not pretty until the Norman rulers recognized that English was a viable language on its own and allowed them to continue using English and not speaking Old French. It didn't work out well until probably about the 13th century.
And
so they didn't play nice.
The myth has so permeated culture in general, and not just the culture of Britain, but culture in general, that you see it everywhere. I mean, like, you had Ready Player One stars the character Parzival, or that's what he chooses to name his avatar, probably because Percival was taken, and so he changes it to Parzival, and he's hunting the egg, and he wants to... Parzival hunts for the Holy Grail, so he sees the connection. And then we have Kingsman has a round table of men who are serving the crown when other people can't, and they choose to name themselves after the knights: Percival, Lancelot, Galahad, and then their tech person is Merlin. And I would say even in Ready Player One, Holliday's character, I can't remember the wizard's name now, in Ready Player One.
I was like, is
Anarath?
Holiday?
It starts with an A.
You're real close. You're real damn close, and I can't remember for the life of me.
Well, either way, I mean, like, he's obviously based his character off of like ancient wizards which all came from Merlin. So I mean, there's almost a connection there.
Anorak.
I said Anarath, but yeah, Anorak. I almost want to say Asarak sometimes, but I'm like, nope, that's a different character.
Azarath? Metreon?
Zinthos? So what would be your favorite modern retelling, or even just a story that kind of ties itself into Arthurian legend?
The movie The Sword and the Stone, the Disney movie, is probably my favorite. I can watch it on repeat. It's that and Monty Python's Arthur and Holy Grail. Those are the two I could watch on repeat. Those are my favorite modern retellings. Even though I'm sure there's more recent ones, but
The Sword and the Stone is definitely gave me my idea of a wizard duel. Like, even when I think about them in D&D or other pieces of media, when I think of a wizard duel, that's the first thing I think of, is the one from Sword and the Stone.
Yes, between him and I can't think of her name.
Mad Maggie?
Madam Mim.
Yeah,
that's her name. That's one of the reasons it's my favorite, is the two of them just going weird as all get out.
You can't tell me she's not some kind of fey creature.
Oh, of course she is. She turns purple. She honestly, in some ways, kind of reminds me of a slightly more sane Bellatrix Lestrange.
I could see that.
Nice.
And Arthurian legend even made its way into Harry Potter with the Weasley family, because you have Arthur, and you have Percy, who's Percival, and the name Ginevra is a variant of the name Guinevere.
Ginny. I didn't know that was her full name.
Yeah. It's not
I think
really
they straight
given
up
a lot in the books.
mention Merlin in the books too. Like as
like
an ancient,
they kind of use him as like
Doesn't he have laws
instead
or
of
something?
oh dear God, they say oh my Merlin, stuff like that.
But weren't there like a set of laws or something like that were named after Merlin, or I don't know.
I think there was also like an ancient form of magic that Merlin used to use that's now like lost to time. I don't know. But Baron, what would be your favorite modern story?
I would say it was the made-for-TV short series, or maybe a made-for-TV movie, by the name of Merlin.
Yeah, that was. I love that one too.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was Grant. No, wait. Sam Neill. Why do I want to keep calling him Grant? Anyway, yeah, Sam Neill was Merlin in that, and it was the first thing I saw Martin Short in that made it just broke my heart. And like this guy is supposed to be funny, and like his performance in this was like, you know what, buddy, you have reached another level in my book. But yeah, it was a star-studded cast. Star-studded. James Earl Jones was in it, and I forgot all about him.
There's another series called Merlin that the BBC did, where it's a young Merlin and a young Arthur that I really like.
That TV series gave me my favorite depiction of the Lady in the Lake, because it combines different thoughts of mine. The Lady in the Lake being an actual person, but also pulling the sword from a stone being the process of smelting down like stones and stuff to get iron, and then making that iron into steel, and then making that steel into a sword, pulling the sword from the stone. It was always, to me, was like a allegory for the blacksmithing process. So, and then the Lady of the Lake giving him the sword. So it was like, of course, they're going to pull the sword from the stone, and Lady of the Lake's going to give it to him. She's a blacksmith. I liked it.
Well, and there's interesting connections to that as well, with her being a blacksmith. Saint Bridget was a blacksmith, and she's deeply connected to Arthurian legend. She was one of the, if you go back to Druidic lore, she is one of the goddesses, and she's the goddess of smithing, and some people believe that she was the Lady of the Lake.
Nice. I have, like, just when it comes down to like the Bridget and Saint Bridget, or Bridget and Saint Bridget stuff, it's like, oh, I don't like how the Catholic Church just took a whole bunch of like Celtic gods and figures and just melted them down into this, and it's like,
well, if you think about it, they really did that everywhere that they found religions like that.
Yeah.
In order to assimilate the people that were already there and make it more acceptable to them.
Definitely fuels that fire, yeah.
So, a friend of mine celebrates St. Bridget's Day in both the Christian and pagan traditions. So.
Definitely in different ways, but yeah.
Yes.
But I will say this, that I think of all the figures that got Christianized, Bridget was probably the one that stayed truest to who
she's the most consistent.
Yeah.
Because they literally just took her from being this goddess to, here, she's a saint that does the same thing.
Yeah, I think that Bridget was that big of a deal. She was that big of a deal that if they were going to do that, they couldn't just be like, oh, well, Saint Bridget was, the patron saint of rivers, and, people would get mad if they would have done something like that, so.
Sure.
It was a big enough deal that for centuries, women in England would wear what's called a St. Bridget's cap to cover their hair. So they adored her as both the saint and the goddess. The Celtic traditions and Druidic traditions, which Merlin most likely came from, Merlin might have been a title, and Amorous his given name. But
it's
no
funny,
one's really sure.
As you say that, and like I've read, and this is just an interesting theory, just like I think all of this is just an interesting theory. So you have Merlin is just a title, which I've heard and actually makes a lot of sense. But then I also read that Arthur is also just a title. As the ancient British tribes would, their people, like the leaders of their clans, would be named after animals. And the bear was very feared, and they would name their, like, just say the leader of their tribe after bear. So Arth being
Arthur.
Right. Well, getting into this would be Arth would be like the bear, right? And then Ursus being the Latin, or Greek, I should say, Greek, Well, is it Latin? Anyways.
Ursus is Latin.
Okay, then yes. Arctos is Greek. Anyways, Ursus, Latin, which would go into the belief that he was a Latin Roman kind of mixed with the British, and they mixed those two things. So it was really interesting when I first read it, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that.
Well, what's really neat is the other tradition, if you go to Wales, it means son of Uther, which means son of the bear. Mm-hmm. So it works in multiple traditions somehow.
That works.
Well, and going back to Merlin being actually named Emrys, there's a story in Bedalgurt, Wales.
See, there we go, trying to pronounce those Wales words again.
I don't know how to pronounce it, and I know I butchered it. But there's a city called Dinas Emrys, and supposedly in the time of Vortigern, he was trying to build a hill fort, and every night it would crumble. All the walls would just fall, and no one could figure out why. Well, one of his soldiers came to him and said, well, I know this boy that could tell us what's going on. And he goes and he finds Merlin Emrys, and he takes him to Vortigern, and he tells him that underneath of the hill are two dragons that each night awaken and fight each other. So they dig into this hill, and they find a lake, and when they drain the lake, inside are a white dragon and a red dragon, and each night they wake up and they fight. Well, the white dragon eventually escapes, leaving the red dragon behind. The red dragon eventually becomes the dragon that you see on the flag of Wales. And then there was peace, and Vortigern raised the hill fort, and it was named Dinas Emrys in Merlin's honor. But the really cool thing is in 1941, they were doing some excavations in the area, and they found the hill fort that Vortigern supposedly built. And when they were excavated deeper, they found a lake, and evidence that the walls had been rebuilt multiple times.
Nice. So, speaking of which, if you find yourself trying to build a fort every day and it collapsing every day, maybe you need to relax and take a bath with our affiliate Geeky Clean, who are proud to present their monthly Dice Bomb subscription box, the ultimate dice goblin enabling service. If you sign up now, the first dice bomb you will receive will be April's Daisy Flower Scented Bath Bomb with sunflower dice inside, and then each month you will receive a carefully curated dice bomb complete with a set of premium resin dice for your TTRP collection.
I thought that was going to be another Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Quest for the Holy Grail reference, where he builds it on the swamp and it falls down, he builds it up again. Thought for sure that's where it was going, but nope. I thought we were going to bust out into song. I was ready for it.
Well, if you want to sing, I'm not going to stop you.
No singing. No singing.
No renditions of Brave, Brave Sir Robin?
No singing.
No, and stories differ about Vortigern, too. Some stories he was good, and some stories he was definitely the villain. Just like pretty much everything else from that time period. It's black or white. There's no in between.
Again, I think it just comes down to people pushing their agendas. Mm-hmm. Like if they, well, like for instance, let's just use Lancelot. You know, Lancelot, the flag waving member of the French army there back in the ancient Arthurian times. Depending on who wrote him, he's either a bad guy because they don't like the French, or he's the good guy because they're French.
Well, and the crazy thing is, they took a lot of the stories from Geoffrey of Monmouth, who was writing for the Norman French, and wanted them to be these amazing men, and almost all of the names are very, very French. Parzival, Lancelot du Lac, they're all just crazy French names. Bertilac, the Green Knight, they're so French. It's a little disturbing at times, and you wonder how they got that particular sound. Old French is almost as bad as Welsh, but it kept that tradition. So we know Lancelot is Lancelot of the Lake. He was the foster son of the Lady of the Lake, so they're like, oh, you're hers? Fine, that's what we'll call you.
To go back to the question earlier, I would say that my favorite modern rendition of Arthurian legend isn't necessarily a movie or a show or anything like that, but there is a game called Shadows over Camelot. It's a board game, and it's one of my favorite ones to break out at game night. It's got like asymmetrical kind of deal to it where you all choose to either play as King Arthur or one of the knights, and then at the beginning of the game you are handed out cards that either say loyal or traitor. So if there are 4 players, you draw 5 cards. 4 of them say loyal, 1 of them says traitor, and you hand them out and you keep them secret. So literally it could be that there is no traitor because there are 4 loyal cards available, but the entire time you could have a traitor amongst you trying to stop you from achieving your goals. And I've always loved that game. If you are into Arthurian legend and you haven't seen it or you haven't played it, I would highly recommend it.
No, I haven't played that. I'll have to see if I can get a group together here to play that. Not a lot of people here I know like playing a lot of tabletop games like that, so we'll see. I might be able to do it with my SCA group, which talk about playing a game based on Arthurian legend. That's basically what the Society of Creative Anachronism is one big Arthurian legend role-playing game. That's how it started in like the 60s in California.
Like a huge LARP.
Yeah, basically.
I wanted to join as soon as I found out that there was a Roman legion that has a temple to Bacchus in their campground.
Yeah, they tend to show up during like Golf Wars and Pensick in Pennsylvania.
Well, Pensick is the one I heard they go to a lot because it's, they're from the Cleftlands, so it's
one
closer.
It's the biggest thing across the society. So I hope to go one year and be involved in at least Peace Week. I don't know if I want to stay for War Week because that's basically a lot of people being drunk for 6 days.
See, that sounds like a good time for Baron.
I have heard stories from my local SCA chapter, the Black Diamond, and the Canton of Seven Hills of things that were done at Pensick that are just completely off the wall that you'd never think would happen, and yeah, they do.
That's what happens when you allow geeks and nerds to actually let loose, and instead of having to closet themselves around quote unquote normal people, when they're just let their freak flag fly. I mean, crazy stuff will happen.
Yes, it does. I've been to a few events before everything closed. Yay. And they're a lot of fun. And it's complete and utter insanity. And if you want a lot of people that love King Arthur, that's where you go.
I would also say that a lot of people that love King Arthur can be found in the TTRPG lifestyle hobby, especially like in D&D, because there's so much Arthurian stuff in D&D. Like any kind of idea of knighthood that doesn't come from in D&D, it doesn't come from historical references. It's all from Arthurian. That's the ideal of and even the ideal of chivalry as a way to conduct yourself in court, and not chivalry the way to conduct yourself on the battlefield. It is also very taken in by the D&D crowd. So
I always had it explained to me that by SCA that chivalry is how you treat your enemies, courtesy is how you treat your friends.
Yep. That's why, whenever anybody's like, oh, chivalry's dead, it's like, okay, do you want me to, draw my sword and take you out on the battlefield and treat you with honor, but yeah.
Well, and of course Arthurian legend is deeply tied to D&D. Tolkien himself was heavily influenced by Arthurian legend, even though he believed that it had been too influenced by religion by the time it got to him. That's why he didn't want to write anything religion-based into Lord of the Rings, with the exception of, like, the Silmarillion, where you have Iluvatar. He wanted to avoid that because he wanted it to be this standalone thing that anyone could read without having to worry about whether they knew this other thing.
That's why I really appreciate this stuff.
And if you think about it, one of his main heroes is a king who rules by right of bearing a specific sword.
Well, and Gandalf, come on.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, and Gandalf.
I'll say in any D&D game I've ever run, if there is any form of government, like if there is a king, if there are knights, anyone I play with automatically assumes it works the way it does in Arthurian legend. Like when they think of a king, they think of, unless it's like a corrupt king. Like if they think of a king, they think of Arthur. If they think of knights, they think of the Knights of the Round Table. They think of, and like whether or not they realize that's what they're doing or not. It could be people who like, I'm like, I'll tell them about a knight, and then they'll come back at me and they'll be like, oh, well, is the knight like this? And I'd be like, oh, you mean like of the Round Table? And they'll be like, I don't know, I've never read anything that's Arthurian legend. And I'm like, well, it's what you're referencing.
It's very deeply ingrained in Western culture. Mm-hmm. It's been around for 1,500 years. It's a good chunk of who we are.
At least those of us, and like I will say that definitely those of us of European descent and in countries that are mainly of people of European descent, it is a huge factor.
There's stories of Arthur that span from Ireland to places in like even into Greece and areas like Macedonia, Poland, Romania, because he apparently traveled through those. There's stories of him going to Rome to fight the Roman emperor, and he defeats Lucius, who I mentioned earlier, in battle, and then ends up going to Rome being like, this is mine. If you want Britannia, this is mine too.
As a culture, I think we'll always identify with stories about the chosen one. I mean, like it's in any, well, not any popular story, but most popular stories have the chosen one. I mean, like you've got go ahead.
Yeah, I was just about to say Star Wars is essentially an Arthurian myth. Mm-hmm. Even sleeps with his sister. Well, not really, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, like it's the hero's journey. I mean, like it's, and I don't know if Arthurian legend is the first example that someone could find of the hero's journey of there being a chosen one or anything like that. I don't know what would be the first example, but I mean,
the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Oh, there you go. But I mean, like we're always gonna identify with that, and especially with like, you know, I don't know if this is the way it is in the original tellings, but when the mouse gets a hold of it and it says has this boy that came from nothing, he's the chosen one, and he's the one who can pull the sword from the stone, and he's king. Like that's even better. You take somebody who can come from nothing and make them the most important person in the world, and everybody's gonna love that story.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever read the Redwall series by Brian Jacks?
No, I have not.
There's the first book in the series is just called Redwall, and in it is these mice that run this abbey called Redwall, and their hero is Martin, who started it. And things have gone downhill, and this enemy is at their gate, and they have to find Martin's armor and his sword and shield. And a prophecy is given that it will be found by I Am That Is. And it turns out to be this little clumsy mouse that had been an orphan that literally had nothing. He'd been raised by the abbot. His name is Matthias. And it's him finding this armor and becoming this chosen hero. It's very, very much Arthurian legend. And also a really good book. And his story, he comes from nothing. The abbey itself, back to Martin, comes from nothing. And that's the essential part of Arthurian legend, is that someone who has nothing, like Sir Tor, is the son of of a pig farmer, and he becomes one of the greatest knights of the Round Table, even though we don't really know his name.
Yeah, it's always going to be a story. Anybody who can come from nothing and be something is always going to be a story that's people are going to latch on to. Maybe at some point in time we need some more stories that, like, you know, people don't just come from nothing and all of a sudden become something, and less stories that are like, yeah, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, like, because it's not as possible today, and maybe we need to be a bit more realistic and instill some fantasies that aren't that. But as long as those fantasies exist, I mean, we're still going to enjoy them.
Oh, of course. They're the possibility of what we could be.
And it's the story of every D&D character. I mean, like, you start as like the level 1 nothing. I mean, technically, depending on the version of D&D you're playing, if you're level 1, you're kind of already a hero. But I mean,
compared to everybody else, yes.
Yeah. But even so, you start as nothing and, like, you get to grow. I mean, like, that's not only D&D, that's any video game where you get to grow as a character and get new powers, and, like, you know, it's progression.
And there's nothing like, here, let's play a game where one good whack can do you in.
Yep.
It's what we were just talking about last week.
Yep.
Elden Ring and Dark Souls and all that. Just
Yeah. Ever played Hades?
Yep.
Yeah, but we were actually talking about that last week too. I think if someone were to make a good video game about Arthurian legend, maybe it would be a Souls type game or an Elden Ring type game.
I think if you, man, there's got to be one. But I think if you did like a Arthurian legend type game, it should be you play one of the knights, even if you have to make up a knight and, you know, you go out and you have to do like the things that, you know, pop up in the Arthurian legend. Like maybe you have to track down the Grail, or maybe you have to kill the questing beast, or, you know what I mean? Just any of these things that get put in front of you, and maybe one of the knights hops in and helps out, and that's why he gets credit for finding the Grail, or, you know, Palamedes jumps in and that's why he gets credit for killing the questing beast. You know, it could be anything like that, and it could be great. And then make it like a Dark Souls type game where, you know, if you roll the wrong way, you're going to get smashed.
And that happens to the knights a lot. They get pretty beat up. There's a set of twins in Sir Thomas Malory's book. They're Balin and Balin, and they end up fighting and killing each other because of a quirk of fate where one discards his arms to take up another shield. That would be rolling badly. Probably a persuasive roll. Because it does not end well for quite a few of the knights.
If given a budget and allowed to make your own Arthurian legend project, what direction would you take it?
Oh, goodness. I'd probably follow something similar to Sir Thomas Malory's, where he tells the stories of each of the knights and Arthur along the way. Because each get their own chapter, and you follow their stories even when they're mixed into all the other crazy.
So you think
try to tell like as much as I could.
Like
I would be
one of those shows where like the episodes are like an hour long each,
and you follow each one of the different knights doing what their main quest is. You'd have to give like 2 episodes to Gawain and Percival for the quest for the Grail and the Green Knight, because those are 2 of the most important ones that take place in Arthurian legend. And the crazy thing is, Percival isn't even the one that finds the Grail. It's Galahad.
Mm-hmm.
But Galahad screws up, and Percival makes the right choice.
And that's after it smacks Lancelot in the face and knocks him out for 3 weeks.
It does. Lancelot had wanted to sit in the Siege Perilous, which is the seat at the Round Table for those who would take on the Grail quest. But he wasn't allowed to because he was an adulterer. He doesn't get to hold the Grail, and he literally sees it for a split second, and the only reason for that is because Galahad is his son. And Galahad also pulls a sword from a stone. The sword he pulls is one that says he would be the greatest knight in all England, even greater than Lancelot. And Merlin knew that, and the crazy thing is Lancelot's original name given to him by his parents was Galahad, and they changed it to Lancelot. They screwed him over so much.
It's funny imagining kind of like what I was saying before. I'm sure this isn't what happened, but it's funny to think of, like, you have Lancelot, and then you get like a British writer that's like, oh well, he was named Galahad at first, but they changed his name to Lancelot, and then he has a son Galahad who's destined to be the greatest. It's like, come on, guys.
That's literally what Mallory did.
Yeah.
Mallory, you petty bitch.
Yeah, Sir Thomas Mallory, that is literally what he did.
Yeah, because like Lancelot was originally written by once again, not going to try with names, but the French author, as like his character that he was adding into Arthurian legend. He was like, Lancelot is the best knight ever, and he does everything, and even Guinevere loves him, and he rights all the wrongs, and he fights for love. And then Thomas comes along, he's like, yeah, Lancelot, he actually isn't worthy of anything. Like, he's extremely unworthy, and all the stuff that Lancelot did, Galahad does, but he does it better because he's better.
Chrétien de Troyes was the original author of Lancelot, and yeah, him and Thomas Mallory, they don't play nice.
I really wish that we could have gotten like a back and forth. Like,
goodness.
He wrote one, and then Thomas Mallory was like, oh, this is not going to stand. And then he wrote one,
goodness,
and then just back and... Oh, my God. What a great time in literature
that would have been amazing. That just...
Lancelot would have literally come out of the book like, oh, look, guys, you gotta fuck off with this shit right now. Just make somebody else up. Leave me alone, please.
Well, and Guinevere gets the short end of the stick, too.
Always. That is not even no one can debate otherwise. It doesn't matter who is writing her, that poor woman gets shit on all the time.
Yeah, she does. Like, she's in some cases this honorable queen who, upon Arthur's death, goes to a nunnery. In some cases, she fights with Mordred in order to take control of Camelot. In some, she's an adulteress. In one, she's almost burned at the stake as a witch until Lancelot saves her.
Because she doesn't, weigh as much as a duck. I mean, anybody can see that.
That's just logic and science.
Right. I mean...
We are men of letters, after all.
We are men of letters. What a silly term that is. Men of letters. We should do a whole podcast on that.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, man. I'm your guildmaster, Baron Kane, and I'm the letter A.
So, Baron, if you have a budget, what would your Arthurian legend project be?
The Return of the King. I would, I don't know how I would go about it. I would probably try not to be influenced by the Biker Gang Knights of the Round Table book series that I read, but it will definitely be like a child is born, and he is the reincarnation of King Arthur, and I don't know if I don't know if I would do the knights are also reincarnated, because it's not in the prophecy for them to be reborn. It's Arthur is meant to be reborn. However, I would have Merlin crawling his cobwebby ass out of a cave of crystal and going to Arthur's aid, and then bringing together a new series of knights.
It wouldn't necessarily have to be reincarnation. You could also do descendants of the knights.
Mm-hmm.
Nah. Reincarnation in mind. Don't you try to get your creative liberties into my story. I paid good money for this story.
Yes, sir.
Of which you gave me imaginary money for. But yeah, I would do a reincarnation, but I would also do, like, the knights would not be reincarnated. They would be just brand new people with brand new legends, and those people would be the human element of my story, the lens through which we, the viewers, are watching this unfold.
Would you use anybody, like, currently famous as, like, Arthur goes and finds this famous person and just like, yeah, you're a knight now? Like, Will Wheaton's the new Percival or something like that?
That would be funny. That would be funny.
Or he finds somebody in a LARP group and is like, "You fight with honor."
You know who it would be? It'd be Bill Murray. I mean, I'm not a huge Bill Murray fan, but let's face it, he keeps popping up in these things as himself. He'd be the only choice for me. But yeah. And that's the other thing too. I would definitely steer away from you're the new Percival or you're the new Galahad. I'm going to say, hey, you're John Smith, and you're this construction guy who saved his family from blah 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 blah. And or what would be really really good is this is going to sound super super D&D, right? You have John Smith, the construction guy, but his family died, and he is really kind of struggling with himself, and it basically a man without a cause. And then this kid and old man come up to him with this hopeless cause, this weird stuff, but it just resonates with him on such a deep level that he's just like, you know what do I got to lose? And he does it and ends up becoming his greatest of knights.
I'd read that.
Me too.
Oh yeah. I would too, and I'm just now thinking about it, so damn it.
And now you got to write a book. That's
God damn it. Copyrighted. Don't take my idea.
I mean, it's open. It's a public domain at this point. So good luck.
No. I mean, not the way I'm writing it. Though.
Yeah, Sir John Smith. That's yours.
Fine. Right. If I hear a story of a Sir Don Smith,
the construction worker
who lost his family and becomes his greatest knights, I will sue.
We've got it recorded.
Yeah, you heard me. Any lawyer would take up that cause.
Yeah, totally. I think I would just. I would just steal your video game idea, like where you play as a new knight, and it's like an Elder Scrolls or Elder Scrolls. No, not Elder Scrolls. Elden Ring or
I do it.
Dark
Elder Scrolls too.
I
don't fucking care.
And
Get
then,
on it, Bethesda.
Every time you get around to do something actually amazing, every time you actually work through everything and go to do the amazing thing, one of the other knights just shows up and takes the credit.
That would be cool.
I'm just stealing that wholesale if given the budget, and that's going. Yep, that's the project I want.
Yeah, I didn't even think about doing like a video game project. Just like, oh yeah, movie, totally. That's the only way for me.
See, like someone that does theater constantly, individual plays telling their stories, bringing it to life on stage.
Oh, a play would be nice. Give me a lot of money, do a play. That would be fun.
Well, see, that's why I love the musical Camelot, because it focuses more on the relationship between Lancelot and Guinevere than it does Guinevere and Arthur. But that story is still there. Mm-hmm. Spinning that off into the other knights' stories. Some of the men we haven't heard of, like Tor and Bedivere, and the Balin and Balin, the twins. Stories that we just don't know because they're not as popular as Percival and Gawain.
I want a good story of Palamedes.
Yeah, he's
my favorite one. The Saracen Knight.
Galahad inspired 150 of Arthur's knights to go hunt for the Grail, even though Arthur thought it was a bad idea, right? And it's like
they all followed him. Yes,
it's Galahad, Lancelot, Percival.
You better name all 150.
Gawain, and then 146 more expendable knights.
No,
because they're not named. That's the thing. They're just
give those knights their due.
They're red shirts.
Oh, well then you've got men like Bedivere, who his story is really only mentioned at the end of the Battle of Camlan, after Arthur has been killed by Mordred, when he's told he has to throw the sword back. But it's given to another knight. I think it's Percival or Gawain that's supposed to throw it back, and they can't do it. So Bedivere takes the sword and throws it into the lake.
That's
and Palamedes, yeah, I'd never heard Palamedes' story before until yesterday when I was listening to some Arthurian legends, and I thought that was really neat. I hadn't read it before, that he came all that way.
when I first heard of him, he was just the Saracen Knight,
Mhm.
right? And that's all anybody ever called him. And then finally, just doing some digging, I found out, this guy has a name. They just didn't want to name him because he was Arab.
Yep.
It's like, jeez.
Well,
So-
that happened, of course, because he had a name up until the Crusades, when his name was taken out and he was just called the Saracen Knight.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's after when Arthur shows up in stories after the First Crusade, they erase pretty much any mention of Palamedes, is what I found out.
Yep, that makes sense.
Because I hadn't heard of him before, and I thought it was interesting that there's this knight that comes all this way, and he has no name until, like, he's not named again until almost the 17th century.
Right.
So there's
he has a-
500 years where he's not spoken of.
I think he has a brother that is a knight as well, too. I'm not 100% sure.
Neither am I.
But my point is, if someone does want to write something Arthurian legend or do any kind of project that's Arthurian legend, there are 140 some knights that are just completely unnamed and uncredited, and you can go ahead and write whatever you want about them because it's completely public domain and they don't have a story. So,
and if a name's not given and there's just like, there's 100 random knights from whatever Guinevere's father's name, that I can't remember, he sends 100 knights with the round table as a wedding gift for Arthur, and those 100 knights are never named.
there you go.
So, I have a proposal. First ever. See if we can do this. All right? First ever. All 3 guild decrees all at the same time.
Okay.
We each name one of the 146 knights.
Oh, hold on.
We can decree it right now. Oh, you're a DM. You should be used to this shit.
Oh, I know. It's like, what's the tavern owner's name? Hold on, let me go grab Xanathar's guide real quick. Okay, guild decree.
Wait, I have to think of something. Oh,
You have through me and Barons to come up with something.
Yep.
Guild
First
decree.
First time ever. 3.
Knight number 126, Sir Edric Balthier.
Oh, nice. All right. Knight number 79, Sir Osborne. Spelled Asborne. No, wait. No. Let me take that back. Osbjorn.
Oh.
Osbjorn.
Osbjorn, I like it.
He's a Northman.
I'm stuck. I can usually pull something out of the top of my head, but
we're both dungeon masters. We've been doing this for a long time.
Pull something from Tolkien.
Let's see. Number 89 is Fingolfin of Beleriand.
Nice.
Excellent. That definitely is a first time. The first time all 3 guild decrees have been used for the same purpose. That makes it a very powerful decree, I have to say. Yeah. I mean, like
Not one.
It's
Not
like
2. No less than 3.
It's
no
like,
more than 3.
It's like when 3 spells combine together to become one spell, like you see in like the movies and they like twist around together. Like it's the 3 together have become one more powerful entity.
Mm-hmm. 3, also very powerful number in the Arthurian legend. The Holy Hand Grenade, come on.
Well,
so you're gonna have to tell me. You said like he explained the reference. You said your teacher like
because
I don't know that reference
because it's a holy hand grenade and 3 is a holy number.
Mm-hmm.
So when he did it, every time they try to do the number 3, they miss it.
Mm-hmm. The point is it's a holy number because it's the number of the Trinity.
Right.
That makes sense.
It's also why you don't hear the number 7 in the movie, because 7 is also the number of completion, holiness. It's why it's not used either.
But yeah, it's very funny.
It's
1, 2, 5, 3, sir. 3.
A friend of mine actually dressed up for Halloween one year when I was in high school as a knight with the bunny on his neck.
Which I always saw the bunny as like kind of like a version of the questing beast as well. They weren't questing for it, but it was on the quest, and it's a fucked up animal. So yeah, that's how I always saw it. I actually have that. I have that bunny actually.
why does that not surprise me? No, it's like Arthur goes on a quest, and this random white stag comes out of nowhere, being chased by a group of hounds. They go on a quest and they meet some giants. On the way to do something else, they meet ogres.
That was a cool scene. That was a cool scene in Gawain and the Green Knight, by the way, is the giants. In the movie, Gawain.
I was going to say, I don't remember that from the book, but I need to see the movie.
They took stuff and they moved it around. Yeah, it was all there. Such a good, you know what? I don't care what anybody says. It was a good movie. Beautiful. The acting was amazing. And you get, and again, star-studded cast. You get these people that are in all these different things. Did you watch Falcon and Winter Soldier?
Yes.
Okay, so the girl that was the head of the super soldier group with the red hair, she's in it. I also think Druig from Eternals is in it. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I don't remember anybody's names from that movie, honestly, but yeah, they're great.
I will need to watch that. I did watch the one that you recommended. Yeah, that you recommended, Baron. Oh shoot, it's Arthur, Legend of the Sword, or something along those lines.
Oh yes.
I watched it and loved it.
It's great, isn't it?
It's such a good movie.
And that soundtrack,
a little cheesy, but it's good.
Yeah. Oh, and Jude Law was amazing in that. So it's so over the top, and I think that's what lets it be cheesy, is because it's so over the top. And I think it's also one of the first Arthurian things where I saw actual like magic going down. Because like you could argue it in Excalibur, and I guess there's a lot of stuff going on in the Merlin one that's my favorite. But again, that's another reason why it's one of my favorites, is because you actually get a lot of magic in it. So,
have you guys ever seen Quest for Camelot?
Yeah,
it's an animated film.
When I was younger, that was, well, I shouldn't say younger. I mean, I don't know. What year was that came out?
90s?
Hold on a second.
I have not seen it.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
That is the movie that got me interested in King Arthur.
Really?
Was Quest for Camelot, yes.
1998.
Yeah, I was 9.
So, yeah, I was fairly young. I found that movie, like, I bought the DVD. I'd never seen the movie before. Bought the DVD. Came with a stuffed toy of the dragon with 2 heads.
Yes.
And so I had the stuffed toy, and after I bought the DVD, I watched that movie, I don't know, 100 times. Like, I just watched it over and over again. So yeah, I'm very familiar with Quest for Camelot.
Well, and there's some big names attached to it. You've got, I think Gary Oldman and Carrie Elwes are some of the voices, and it's one of the first movies that I saw that was around King Arthur, and I remember seeing it in the theater when it came out because I begged my parents to go see it, and I fell in love with it. I have the stuffed animal of that dragon somewhere.
Baron, since you haven't seen it, I think if you sat down and watched it with the Spawn, I think you would both enjoy it very much.
You know,
yes.
She surprises me, though, because one of the first Disney movies I tried to sit her down and watch was The Sword and Stone. Why? Because it's one of my favorites. Would she sit down and watch it? She said no. She flipped me off, and she walked out of the room. She didn't do any of that, but she didn't watch it with me.
I think the reason I say I think she'd like it, there's a lot of weird monsters in it. Like, the bad guy, the way he makes his army is he, like, throws... Well, like, the first thing he does to test it is he throws a bird in the cauldron with an axe.
Chicken!
A chicken, yeah, and it comes out as axe beak. Like, it's this amalgamation of an axe and a chicken.
Gosh.
And that's how he creates his army.
And all of a sudden it can talk.
Yeah. And that's how he creates his army, is he throws soldiers in this goop with weapons, and they come out as, like, these amalgamations of soldiers and weapons, and, like, there's a awesome griffin in it, and, you know, a 2-headed comedy relief dragon.
I did see the griffin at, like, just when I looked it up, just to be like, have I seen this? And I saw the griffin, and that griffin looked pretty tight.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think she particularly would enjoy. I mean, like, I don't know, who knows, kids, man, but I think she would.
It's not as happy-go-lucky as Sword in the Stone is.
Right.
So
and it's got a female protagonist.
Yes, it does.
Because it's not because Arthur is already king, and there are already the Knights of the Round Table. Like the protagonist is the daughter. If I'm not mistaken, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but the protagonist is a daughter of a Knight of the Round Table.
Right, and she's
So
the
one of the
antagonist
150?
whose name I cannot remember.
Yes, so yes, one of the 150.
Yeah, he attacks her home, and she escapes and goes to warn Camelot, and that's her story going through and meeting different people, and I think at one point getting almost eaten by a plant.
Mm-hmm.
Good times.
So, oh goodness, I need to watch it again. It's one of my favorite movies.
Nice.
I'd completely forgotten about that one.
Is that even available on a streaming service right now?
I have no idea. It'd be nice if it was. I haven't seen it in years. But I'm sure she would like that one just because it can be scary at times. Like if you've watched The Black Cauldron with the Horned King.
You know, it's funny as I read the books.
I
had no
have
clue
the
that it was
first
the same
one.
thing.
I have the
clue.
first couple books. I need to read them. But it can be Horned King level scary in places.
Nice.
So, and even that is connected to Arthurian legend because the Horned King can be related to Druidic lore. It can be related to Arthur. He could be a representation of Vortigern, which I think has something. The name relates to something being horned, and I'm not exactly certain.
So, Quest for Camelot is not on any of the streaming services, but it can be rented for around $3. Not a bad deal. And I did not know that Pierce Brosnan was King Arthur in that movie. I did not know that.
Good old Pierce, but it sounds like they just chose a bunch of dudes that were somewhat popular in the 90s and were just like, let's put them in a movie.
The only thing she might not like is at one point they all burst into random song.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a good song, though.
Oh, yeah, it's got great music. But I'd completely forgotten about that, dang.
Yeah, I'll see if I can sneak that in on her. It's like, look, I know you're super obsessed with Alfred Molina and Willem Dafoe right now, but you know what you would really like? This, I bet they might be in it. You never know. Oh, was that him? It could have been.
It could have been, maybe.
Don't look up IMDb because I know you have a mini computer in your hand. Don't do it.
Yeah, but it's got Don Rickles, Jaleel White. Jaleel White is Bladebeak.
Yes.
So Steve
Which makes it even funnier.
Steve Urkel is the chicken combined with an axe.
Jesus.
Which is great.
Yeah.
And Pierce Brosnan is King Arthur's speaking voice, but Steve Perry is his singing voice.
Wow, Steve Perry, huh?
So yeah, they threw a lot of people in this movie.
Yes, they did. And they all at other places have connections back to all other kinds of connections to Arthur and Druidic lore and all other kinds of stuff. So it just happened at some point that they would all be in one movie about King Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he's only in like 2 scenes. So
It's pretty awesome.
it's hard to believe that movie is 20 years old.
Yeah. So. Oof. It didn't do super well either.
No. I don't want you.
No.
No. Don't put icing on that cake. That movie is almost 25 years old. That movie is almost 25 years old.
Oof.
All right.
Okay. Oof. That's all I can say.
And there's a whole generation going, it's so old.
Yeah. Well, I mean it's like twice their age. So
Good times.
I was gonna say there is a suspicious lack of Arthurian legend movies, but like I just remembered that The Green Knight like just came out last year,
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So I guess,
But I mean, until then though, you're not necessarily wrong.
But there's been a lot of like made-for-TV stuff that's Arthurian legend, like Galahad. If you can manage to sit through like 12 hours of some of the stupidest stuff I have ever seen. Like him and that bearded dragon that he claims is a actual dragon.
Gallivant.
Gallivant, that's what it is, Gallivant. I don't know why I was saying Galahad. Gallivant, yes.
I love Gallivant.
I've watched...
I love it. Weirdest thing I've ever seen.
I've watched literally every episode of Supernatural.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure I can handle that.
Oh, yeah. Then, yeah, you'll be fine.
I love Supernatural, don't get me wrong, but they have some stupid shit in that show.
They also share some actors between Gallivant and Supernatural.
My favorite, Timothy Omison, who played Cain in Supernatural. Don't know why I would like that so much.
That was definitely the one I was referencing as far as shared actors.
It took me a little bit to warm up to Gallivant because I'm like, this is not what I had expected it to be. And then it was like, this is fun. I'm just going to hang on for the ride.
I'll watch anything that Weird Al attaches himself to.
Fair. Speaking of Arthurian stuff, he just did like a happy birthday to Eric Idle for his 79th birthday. It's just so weird. It's like, why do you do this every year? Why did you choose the 79th birthday to do that?
Inspiration struck.
Yeah. But also, those completely unrelated, those two are responsible for my absolute favorite scene in the Transformers movie.
Okay.
Eric Idle and Weird Al Yankovic in the junk bot scene. Weird Al saying "Dare to be stupid."
Gotcha.
And Eric Idle was the voice of the junk bots.
Yep, there you go.
Or at least one of them, the main one. So yeah. And Eric Idle was in Monty Python Quest for a Holy Grail.
There you go.
There, we've come full circle.
Or full round table.
Hey.
We've made a circle all the way around the table.
All the way around the table.
We played Duck, Duck, Goose with the 150 nights.
If we were doing this in real space with each other right now, I totally would have found a round table for us to do this on.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Found some kind of snowball microphone to record everything on, and then just did this. That'd been great.
I forget. Eric Idle did something else. I think he was in the original Spamalot cast, I think. So he got involved with that one too. I think he's the French Knight in Spamalot.
He was not the French Knight in the original one though. That was John Cleese.
No, not in the movie, in the musical.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It was funny because
he might have been someone else then.
No, he could have been. He could have been the French Knight. I was just saying it was funny because John Cleese was the French Knight in the movie.
Yes, and I love John Cleese in that movie.
Let's just be real. We love John Cleese in everything.
Good point.
John Cleese is amazing. He's the only reason why I would watch A Fish Called Wanda.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Let's
be real.
And he ends up in some completely random places in movies.
Well, I mean, the National Lampoons European Vacation. Have you ever seen it?
Yes.
Him and Eric Idle are both in it. I think that at least one other person is in it.
Well, yeah, there's a bunch of actors in that movie.
Are there?
Uh-huh, yeah.
It wasn't just John Cleese and Eric Idle?
Mm-mm.
Awkward. I'm going to have to watch that again.
I won the money. The money is mine.
Now give it to me so I can make my movie. But yeah, I want to say that Terry Gilliam was in it too, but I'm not 100% sure. Or not Terry Gilliam. No, it was someone else. Who the fuck was it? It's the one Monty Python guy. I can never remember his name. I think it's Terry Jones. Terry Jones was in it, I think. You know what? I'm gonna go into a rabbit hole deep dive after this. I'm not gonna waste our time on here because now I want to be like, okay, who all cameoed in that fucking movie? Don't make me watch the movie again. But who cameoed?
Oh yeah, because that'd be a terrible thing to have to do is to watch that movie again.
You're right. I guess I'm gonna. It probably is my favorite one. Wow, how did we get here? Who took us down? You know what? Don't answer that question. Don't ask that question.
Baron, you ready to put a bow on this one?
Yeah, so National Lampoons European Vacation was such a delight.
Wrong podcast.
Oh, shit! No, we could put that down there. Just saying, we could put that in the notes.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, I mean, really, speaking of rabbit holes, if you really want to experience your own rabbit hole, dig into some Arthurian myth, because you will find many. You will be digging for hours. Lots and lots of fun hours. And, come join us over in the Arthurian fandom when you're done, because there's plenty of room for you. And I would say that, much like the Once and Future King, I'm sure we will see many revisits to the story of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, and maybe one of these days the return of the Once and Future King will actually be a story that is told, inspired by him, that will bring us all together and maybe make the world a better place. I actually love that idea. I hope that's actually what it means.
All right, Mary, if anybody liked what you had to say and they want to find you anywhere else on the internet, where can they do that?
I'm on Instagram as Mary_bookworm. Worm is with a Y, like a dragon, 89, and you can find me there.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Casters Guild. Please email us at castersguild@gmail.com and find us on all the socials. Check out our affiliate, Geeky Clean, geekyclean.com/discounts/guild decree. Get 10% off your entire order. Links are in the description down below. Thank you very much. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Now I gotta go find that lake.